from the Newsmax studio in New York City, here is Steve Malzberg.
Your letter describes the Lois Lerner emails as being unrecoverable.
Correct.
But fails to mention where the damaged hard drive is today. Do you know where the actual hard drive is that crashed in 2011?
I'm advised the actual hard drive, after it was determined that it was dysfunctional and that with experts no emails could be retrieved, was recycled and destroyed in the normal process.
So was it physically destroyed?
That's my understanding.
So was it melted down? Do you know?
I have no idea what the recycler does with it. This was 3 years ago.
All right, folks, welcome back. Of course, that was from Friday, not 3 years ago. And joining us now is Patrick Howley, a reporter for the Daily Caller. Hey, Patrick.
Hey, Steve, how are you?
I'm all right. I'm all right. You've done some great reporting for the Daily Caller. Your stories about the whole IRS scandal, which is much more than we could say for the networks, who basically, for the most part, until Friday night, had ignored this whole thing. I mean, on so many levels, this is just beyond my comprehension, how they could be claiming this and how they could be getting away with this. I mean, you've pointed out in a piece that the IRS is required by law to keep printout emails for their records, correct?
Right. I mean, they're pretending that they're computer illiterate, which is, a common excuse that they fall back on. But, the Federal Records Act actually requires them to print out every email that gets used in agency business and to file the printed copy in a manila folder somewhere and to keep it in the office. So regardless of the whole issue about the hard drive, we already know that they're in violation of federal law because they weren't keeping hard copies of these things.
Have they been, to your knowledge, have they been asked this? Did any of the congressmen ask if they've been keeping the hard copies? Or you remember one of the answers from the, I think to Ryan, from the commissioner, he said, you're telling us this now, or you told us 3 days ago? And he said, that's because you just asked us 3 days ago. But he had known this for months. So my question is, to your best of your knowledge, has this been asked? Because maybe they do have the hard copies, but no one's asked for them, so they're just not handing them over.
Right. It hasn't been asked yet, but I know that Darrell Issa is very knowledgeable about the Federal Records Act, and I imagine that it will come up tonight at the hearing at 7.
Yeah, primetime hearing. That's going to be very interesting. So it's possible, if it hasn't been asked, based on previous answers by this commissioner, that he might answer and say, yeah, we have them, and they'll say, well, why didn't you hand them over? And he said, well, you didn't ask me for them yet. I mean, is that possible?
Well, I think if they go to all this effort to scrub Lois Lerner's hard drive and to fire the email archiving company that they were using, that they're not going to hand over, printed out copies. I can't imagine that that's a scenario that we're going to see tonight.
So I wonder what the answer is going to be. What do you think they're going to dog eat them? I mean, what?
I know it's really ridiculous at this point. And Paul Ryan's outburst, his righteous outburst on Friday, was really the sentiment that we're seeing, not just from the right, but from everybody, especially people who have worked in government before, who have worked in bureaucracy, and they just realize that this is completely out of control at this point.
Yeah, I want you to hear, and we didn't play too many of these. This is Congressman, I want to get the name right there, Earl Blumenauer from Oregon, Democrat, who is very sympathetic, as a lot of Democrats were, to the IRS, to the IRS commissioner. He tried to turn it around and blame Republicans for attacking the IRS with budget cuts, the government shutdown. Here's some of what he had to say.
What did we do in the government shutdown? What business furloughs its accounts receivable department? Not one that stays in business very long. Not one that has the capacity to deal with layers and layers of complexity and a vast system where people pound away on the IRS and the people who work there. I'm amazed that anybody takes those jobs, from you on down, and I appreciate they do.
He blamed it all on the government shutdown, on the Republicans for cutting the IRS budget. He had no problem, apparently, with the hard drive being thrown away.
Oh, the IRS, they're just wonderful people. I mean, we've heard that from the Washington Post and the New York Times and the major networks for the past year. I mean, this has been great PR for them. They're underpaid, they're underfunded. Lois Lerner only lives on a $3 million property in Bethesda, Maryland. You know, she can't afford a $4 million property, so it's rough out there for an IRS agent.
All right, now I want you to hear Hillary, who was asked by Greta on her Fox News interview to comment on the IRS scandal and specifically what Obama had said to Bill O'Reilly, that there's not a smidgen of impropriety here, and it's just three, knuckleheads in Cincinnati or whatever. And here's how that answer came out.
Well, I think that anytime the IRS is involved, for many people, it's a real scandal. And I think, though, that there are some challenges that rightly need to be made to what is being said, and I assume that the inquiry will continue. So I don't have the details, but I think what President Obama means there is there really wasn't a lot of evidence that this was deliberate, but that's why the investigation needs to continue.
So here she is, and let's talk about the political aspects of this for a second. I mean, here she is separating herself from what Obama said, actually saying anytime the IRS is involved, it's a scandal, and that's why we have investigations. And she's apparently, unlike what she said about the Benghazi investigation and the Select Committee to Diane Sawyer, this one she seems to have little problem with, probably because she's not involved, but nonetheless, she's supporting the investigation.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised to hear that, but, you look at Hillary and you look at Bill Clinton, and obviously this Ed Klein book just came out talking about how much they hate each other, but, with Obama at 44% in the polls, which is still 20 points higher, I think, at this point than he should be, but that number is going down as the VA, the IRS, all these things, Bo Bergdahl, are just adding up, and I think you see the Clintons making more of a concerted effort to distance themselves from Obama, because in this case, what is Hillary Clinton going to run on in 2016 if they ask her about, hey, remember when you defended the idea that 7 different IRS computers crashed and lost all these records in violation of federal law? I mean, she doesn't want that on right. her record going into the campaign because she doesn't need it. She wasn't involved with the IRS. She's taking the sensible view here.
Now, you had mentioned in passing, but you wrote a piece on this, and that was the first I had heard of this, that the IRS fired this email archiving firm after the Lois Lerner crash. Explain what they did for the IRS and how and when they were fired exactly.
There's a company in San Jose, California called Sonasoft Corporation, which is the leading email archiving company in the country. They do email backup servers, so if a computer crashes, they retrieve all of your emails within 10 minutes, they claim in their commercial. They do this service for the New York Times, so it only would have taken a New York Times reporter one phone call to their own contractor to figure out what was going on. But they had a contract in place with the IRS beginning in 2005. They renewed it every year for 6 years in a row. Finally, in 2011, just 10 days after Dave Camp, the congressman, writes his first letter to the IRS expressing concern about what he's been hearing about the targeting, that's when Lois Lerner's computer crashes. 2 months later, that's when the IRS closes out their contract after a 6-year relationship with this company out in California. So now they don't have an email backup contractor anymore. And then you start seeing all these other alleged computer crashes. Nicole Flax, who was an IRS official who was in and out of the White House as a frequent visitor during this time, her computer allegedly crashed just a couple months after they got rid of this contractor. So, we know that Lois Lerner's emails were being backed up at this time, at the time of her computer crash, but these 6 other officials mysteriously had computer crashes in or around the time when they got rid of this contractor.
Yeah, mysteriously is a good word. All right, so where do you think we go from here? I mean, we got the hearing tonight, and then what happens? I mean, there's no way that Eric Holder is going to appoint a special prosecutor. So
of course not.
So what happens? I mean, how does this? How do the right people get held responsible?
Yeah, I mean, Eric Holder is in contempt of Congress himself still from the Fast and Furious scandal. This is going to be a very big hearing tonight, and we're going to Darrell Issa knows the law very well. He knows the Federal Records Act. He knows all the statutes. He has the ability to figure out which federal laws the IRS has violated, and he, I think, is gearing up to prosecute them criminally based on this computer crash. We know now, obviously, based on all of this evidence, that what is in these emails, that in these computer crashes, is the smoking gun. We know that. There's no way that these emails could come back and turn up anything other than something damning for the administration. So we have the smoking gun. We just don't have it in our possession. And it's up to Darrell Issa and it's up to Dave Camp of the House Ways and Means Committee to apply pressure and to use the law and to prosecute these people criminally if they're not going to give up these emails. And he can do that based on the Federal Records Act, which was passed into law in 1960, and that's a perfectly valid way for him to criminally prosecute IRS officials who scrubbed clean these hard drives.
Well, Patrick, I know you'll keep us all informed at the Daily Caller with your great reporting. I thank you so much for being with us, and take care, sir.
Always a pleasure, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure. Patrick Howley, ladies and gentlemen. When we come back, you know what, you love it. It's Gimme 5 on the Steve Malzberg Show.